Hello and welcome to the ScatterVolt channel, and today I'm going to be showing you guys my review of the new Radeon RX 6600. And given its day one availability, should you consider it as a graphics card upgrade finally from like your RX 500, GTX 1600, integrated graphics, yada yada yada, because this card is going to cost $330 according to its MSRP. Anyways, according to my system survey, about half of you watching this video are using a last generation graphics card or integrated graphics, and over half of you are wanting to look into a graphics card upgrade. Just the problem with that is, of course, finding a graphics card in today's age that isn't overpriced, out of stock, and like well over $400 at the minimum. And this card will be in stock on day one for only $330 or around there. So let's go ahead and see if it's a worthy upgrade. So in today's video, I'll be benchmarking this versus the 1660 Super, RX 570, and integrated Vega 8 graphics, just for a comparison's sake if we were to treat this as a GPU upgrade, as well as testing it against its main competition, the RTX 3060. Along with my one major gripe that I have with this graphics card, which I'll be talking about at the end of the video, that could really put off users looking to get this card. So if you enjoy value-based PC gaming content on YouTube, do consider subscribing to the ScatterVolt channel, because I'm trying to help PC gamers navigate through these graphics card shortages and PC part inflations to still do their DIY PC building. So I hear you haven't activated your gaming PC yet. You have that activate Windows watermark in the bottom right of your screen. Don't worry, I'm going to show you how to get rid of it by actually activating your PC through VIP SCD key in under a minute. All right, by now, I'm gonna log in. See, that is in our cart. Let's go ahead and check out. That is 16 bucks. Let's go and type in our code VIP scatter, submit order. I'm gonna go ahead and pay for this through PayPal. That's just how I wanna do it. All right, your order has been created successfully. All right, view keys and codes. Get the key. There's our key right there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and click change product key. Product key, I'm gonna go ahead and type it in. Okay, hit next. Activate. Is this gonna work? Place your bets. Windows is activated. We've activated this copy of Windows, and we only paid 16 bucks for it. So if you wanna activate your gaming PC quick, easy, and simple, do it through VIPSCDkey.com. I'll have a link to the Windows 10 Pro key that I use, as well as other keys that they offer, down at the top of the description below. So let's get a quick rundown of the RX 6600 and some highlights just to note as far as specs go. So really, this is just a skimmed down 6600 XT. It has similar clock speeds, it has a similar memory layout, though it is about $50 less in terms of MSRP. But in comparison to its spiritual successor, that being last year's 5600 XT, it is lacking when it comes to compute units. And even though the 5600 XT launched with 6 GB of GDDR6 memory, it actually was faster and bigger in terms of memory bus and the memory bandwidth speeds. So that is a little bit off-putting considering that card launched last year for $280 and this is about 50 bucks more. Though in comparison to its main competition in a modern day context, that being the RTX 3060, in terms of memory prowess, this card is definitely not beating out the 3060. As we all know, this card has about 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, and it has a bigger memory bus and more memory bandwidth speeds. And this, just with its 8 gigs, is not close to that. Though what this card has going for it are its high clock and boost clock speeds and the TDP, because this card will run cooler because it has only a 132 watt TDP. And I'm gonna say the recommended power supply is probably 500 watts, but it could even be as low as 450, which might be appealing for those of you budget PC builders who got one of those super budget power supplies and just need something that you can just plop in and have a card work with it. Speaking of temperatures and its TDP, on my test bench, amongst all the testing for this graphics card, it maxed out at 67 degrees Celsius and had an average of about 60 to 63 degrees Celsius as well. And that's at a static airflow setting because there's no air running through my test bench. So I think that's really impressive, especially considering that this card is like a basic AIB power color card, nothing fancy. So that's a little bit promising for those of you who chose a PC case that look really cool, but has no front panel airflow, aka all you people who bought the AeroCool Cylon, which has no front panel airflow. So you can probably stick this into one of those PC cases and not suffocate heat death to this card, even though I'd still recommend getting fans for this. So with all that, let's get into the benchmarks, which by the way, I'm running on a 5600G with 16 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz RAM, no, 3600 megahertz RAM, running on a cast latency of 18. And again, I'm testing it versus the 1660 Super and 570 and Vega 8 integrated graphics, just to see how big of a gap we can get amongst those cards and this one in our games that we're testing, along with the 3060, just to see how it stacks up versus the competition. So starting with CSGO, the easiest game to run out of all of these benchmarks. Here the RX 6600 with smart access memory enabled does actually lose out to the 3060 and 1660 Super. Though in my opinion, I wouldn't place too much emphasis on this benchmark, not because I'm biased, but just because CSGO is a very easy to run game in the year 2021, especially at 1080p. And if you're getting well above 300 frames per second in this game, you should have really nothing to complain about. But now let's go on to the first real L, or really the only L, for the RX 6600 versus the competition. Here on Fortnite at epic settings on my benchmark map, I got 92.2 frames per second average versus 151 on the 3060. So here you can see that RTX 3000 series card totally blow the 6600 out of the water in its territory, because Fortnite runs on the Unreal Engine, so it's probably going to be better optimized on NVIDIA cards, which the RTX 3060 is one of those. So that difference is, I mean, it's a little bit bigger than I thought, but hey, it still beat out this 1660 Super, and it definitely beat out the 570 and Vega 8 integrated graphics. But in this one title, if you're looking at running Fortnite, PUBG, or any Unreal Engine game, that RTX 3060 is still going to be the way to go. But now moving on to Forza Horizon 4, which will soon be replaced by Forza Horizon 5, which if you want to see me stream that game, do follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/ScatterVolt. I'll link to it in the description. But here, the 6600 gets its first W versus the 3060 at about 160 frames per second average, which I found to be really surprising because this benchmark on Forza Horizon 4 is fairly balanced between AMD and NVIDIA. Though I think the 3060 would definitely close that gap if we were to run at 1440p or a higher resolution because it has more VRAM, but at least for 1080p, the 6600 takes it, which was kind of surprising. Then going on to Red Dead Redemption 2, where you have the favor quality setting on, so most of the graphics settings are turned up on the Vulkan API at 1080p. Here, the RX 6600 is actually only 4 frames per second behind the 3060, which was surprising because I thought here the 3060 would pull out a bigger lead. Regardless though, that's a 4 frames per second difference, which I think is not too bad for the 6600, since on paper it should be losing to the 3060, but in comparison to the 1660 Super, it does have a pretty big boost, and the 570 could really use some help because that's about half the frame rate of the 6600. Then closing out the benchmarks on Resident Evil Village, setting the graphics to priority, which keep in mind this is definitely an AMD optimized title. The RX 6600 blows the 3060 out of the water with a much higher average frame rate. With the 1% low a little bit, that's slightly concerning to see it at 130, but regardless, the average frame rate was much higher. So in conclusion, other than my one major gripe with this graphics card, which we'll get into in a bit, in a modern day context versus the 3060 and last generation budget graphics card options, this 6600 I think is not that bad. And I mean, I just have a basic AIB card, but imagine if you got one of the fancier ones that had better cooling and maybe even higher boost and base clock speeds. For $330, if you can get it for around that MSRP, I'd consider it. And I'd recommend it because this is probably going to be the only graphics card you can get that is new with in-stock availability on day one that isn't going to be ridiculously overpriced, not just in store like at a Micro Center, but maybe even online like on Newegg or Amazon, where this card won't sell out within a matter of seconds. It'll probably stay up for maybe an hour or two, at least here in the States. And I think overseas, it might actually be a little bit more relaxed. So if you like what you see in terms of performance on the 6600, I'd highly recommend it. More so, especially if you're coming from a budget gaming PC, like from mine or some other PC builder guide that has like a basic 500 watt, 80 plus bronze power supply with like an i3, Ryzen 3 or Ryzen 5 processor. This 6600 is not like ridiculously quick, so it won't bottleneck any of those budget CPU options, but it'll still be mostly utilized by those. And I mean, it's got a low TDP and low wattage, so it'll work with most budget power supplies and most PC cases that may not have the best of airflow if you really cheaped out on something. So not too bad really, but there is one major thing I'm going to have to look out if you were to get this graphics card, or no, you're gonna have to look out for it, is going to be driver support when you first get this card. The 6600 XT did suffer from some pretty severe driver issues when it first got launched, whether it be, say, if your PC was going to sleep and then your PC would just randomly restart and just have to be an annoyance you have to deal with over and over, or random flickerings on screen, or having like PCI Gen 4.0 support be a little bit bugged on B450 motherboards. You are probably going to have to look out for those for this card since it's fairly similar to the 6600 XT. And that really is the one thing I'd look out if you were to get this graphics card. Not everyone had tech issues when they first got the 6600 XT. Some systems worked fine, but I guess if you're not super tech savvy, this card could be a bit of an annoyance on launch. Though I'd still recommend it because it's just so hard to get your hands on a modern day graphics card that's in stock and not ridiculously overpriced. And I don't think people are gonna be lining up in droves to get this card. So really it's just one for budget PC gamers who had a budget gaming PC and just want a nice graphics card upgrade. That'll just work, if the drivers do. So really that's just my overall view on the RX 6600. Not a bad card. If you can upgrade to it, I'd recommend it. So that is it for today's review on this graphics card, and we're gonna close out with another viewer Q&A. I wanna thank you guys for all the responses on the last one. And so for this new one, I actually pulled one from a friend who knows me IRL, but it's a funny question. Actually, it's not funny. If you had to sell your Civic Type R, what would you replace it with in a similar price range? Well, to answer that question, Doc, I don't think there's any equivalently priced Japanese sports car with a stick for about 38K. That's actually fun. The Nissan 400Z is gonna start at like what, 55? The Toyota Supra, the BMW Supra only comes in an auto. And the new, the only car that could replace it would have to be the next Civic Type R coming in 2023. But even then, I'm not, because the car is flipping beautiful. That FK8 10th gen. Anyways, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and this is the ScatterVolt channel, signing out.